Hello, everyone. It's very nice to have you all here with us today. I'm delighted to be welcoming such a large audience to our session on effective fundraising in the nonprofit community. With me here today, you have Boris Tsimerinov and Professor McFarlan. The session today is going to cover a couple of things. First, I'm going to turn it over to our esteemed colleagues here in just a moment. And look to them to share some insights around Professor McFarlan's latest book. After that, I'm very pleased to be welcoming some of our former scholarship recipients here at the HBS Club of Toronto to share some of their experiences and perspectives of participating in non-for-profit leadership development at the school. And so that will come about at around 1 o'clock. In between, we'll have some time for questions and look forward to everyone's active engagement. With that, I'll turn it over to Boris. Boris leads Semper 8 Financial, Semper 8 Health, and Semper 8 Media. He's an alumni of the HBS community and has actively contributed to both not-for-profit and alumni organizations here in the Toronto area. He served as the president of the HBS Club of Toronto and is also involved in our Harvard Alumni for Healthcare. He was recognized as an Arbor Award volunteer for his service, and in late 2021 received the Top 25 Canadian Immigrant Award as well. So lots of perspectives to bring to the table. Boris, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Danielle, thank you kindly. It's excellent to be here to talk about effective fundraising, the trustee's role and beyond, which is a result of Professor Warren McFarlan's 2 decades of research at HBS, along with over 40 years of active social enterprise board service. And of course, to hear the discussion, Danielle, with you and past scholarship recipients from the HBS Club of Toronto Scholarship Program. The session right now in discussion with Professor McFarlan is going to be as interactive as we can make it. Professor McFarlan is very open to people posting questions into the Q&A box as we go along. And if the questions relate to some of the things we're discussing after Professor has made his initial remarks and initial introduction, we will be sure to address them as early as we can, together with some questions and dialogue that Professor McFarlan and I think might be helpful, might be useful to the audience. Professor McFarlan earned his AB from Harvard University in 1959 and his MBA and DBA from the Harvard Business School in 1961 and 1965, respectively. He has had a significant role in introducing materials on management information systems to all major programs at the Harvard Business School since the first course on the subject was offered in 1962. He has been a longtime teacher in the Advanced Management Program, International Senior Managers Program, Delivering International Services Program, and several of the social sector programs. He's currently teaching in several short executive education programs at HBS. In 1973, shortly after his appointment to full professor there, along with 4 other faculty members, he was sent to Switzerland to set up the school's International Senior Management Program. When he returned in 1975, he became chairman of the Advanced Management Program, a position he held until 1978, and then became the chairman of all executive education programs from 1977 to 1980. He then was Senior Associate Dean and Director of Research from 1991 to 1995, Senior Associate Dean and Director of External Relations from 1995 to 2000, and Senior Associate Dean and Director of Asia Pacific from 1999 to 2004. It is an honor and a pleasure to welcome Professor Warren McFarlan. Warren, over to you.
Boris, thank you very much. Let me start by saying it's a real pleasure to be back again with the Harvard Business School Club of Toronto, and I'm particularly glad to be able to, with you, sitting in my office at home, as opposed to freezing my way along Bay Street to come to some hotel location. I'm absolutely delighted today to talk to you about what I've been doing for over half of my time for the last 20 years, which is intense involvement with social enterprise and with the social enterprise and with the various organizations in the Boston area and beyond. Let me begin on my first slide by talking slide that social enterprise is the single most important activity that Harvard Business School students unite around after their love of the case method. The last time we did a study, more than 80% of our alumni are involved in one or more social enterprises, 30% currently serving on one or more boards, 25% will chair one or more boards during their career, and it is a dominant lifetime interest. Whether it is the recent MBA or whether it is the person coming in their mid-80s, we find, as we read the class notes, a steady drumbeat of involvement in this. Now, this is important because people have come to the nonprofit role having been misled by what the management issues are by attending the MBA program. That in 2011, next slide, I wrote a book called Joining a Nonprofit Board, What You Need to Know. And this book was really written as a vaccination certificate for MBA graduates who were going off to join their first nonprofit board. Because at HBS, you go either first year and you have first year accounting control, you have finance 1, you have finance 2, you really understand how important the numbers are. That is not where social enterprise starts. Social enterprise starts in a very different way. Slide. The outline of the book really, I think, is its most important contribution. Chapter 1, an introduction, if you summarize the key contents of the book, and if you think I write in a turgid style, that takes care of about 80% of what you need to get out of the book. The next 6 chapters are the essence. Social enterprise begins with mission. What is the social problem you're trying to solve? How are you going about doing it? Is it still relevant? These mission-based organizations start in an entirely different position than first year finance. The second chapter, how are you doing? Here again, the quantitative numbers are not terribly helpful. The work of my colleague Bob Kaplan and the balanced scorecard, absolutely crucial in terms of helping people translate mission down into tangible products, which they are then able to see how they are doing. Only then in chapter 4 do we then come to finance. And one of the nice things that unites the for-profit and nonprofit world is as long as you have money, things are possible. I have assigned for the last 5 years, I was teaching GMP for any of those students who had not seen the movie Jerry Maguire, that they needed to see it. Because the punchline, Jerry Maguire, show me the money. That is, in fact, the essence. We must, in fact, generate positive cash flow, or like the for-profit world, we disappear. And that comes, of course, to the next chapter, which is what we're going to be talking about today, philanthropy. The sources of funds are starkly different for the most kinds of nonprofits, and that a CEO spends roughly 50% of their time or more out in the unglamorous and nasty world of, in fact, raising money. That in turn leads to boards, which are much bigger and are involved in a much more direct way in fundraising in the nonprofit world than they are in the for-profit world. All of this taking place in the complicated dynamics between normally a non-executive chairman and a full-time CEO. All of these things are what make the world of social enterprise so different. That the next slide really identifies the 3 major roles of the social enterprise board. 1, define and prove the organization's mission and strategy. That is a subject of another lecture. It is something that is deep, powerful, and important. Secondly, select, coach, support, and evaluate the CEO. That is quite similar to the role of a corporate board in the for-profit world. But the third one is quite different, and that is the very active role that a nonprofit board has to spend in helping to secure the financial resources, which in fact make the operation run. Next slide. And this is the subject of my newest book, Effective Fundraising, and the subtitle, very important, The Trustee's Role and Beyond. That over and over again, when I ask people to join a nonprofit board, the first reaction is almost always one of enthusiasm, that in fact, it's hard not to feel good about the fact when you're invited to join something like that. The next question, I say, Warren, you don't expect me to go out and ask people to give money, do you? And the answer is yes. I expect you to give a lot, and I expect that you are going to go out and ask for it. And that is what I really want to talk about. It's the essence of what this book. And if we turn to the next slide, that the sources of revenue from a social enterprise, they come from 5 different sources. Traditional fees for museums, its entry fees, hospital billing payments from the hospital, school fees for schools and universities. Secondly, the annual fund. The annual fund is something done on an annual basis. For some organizations, it is the overwhelming amount of their financial resources. The church does the stewardship committee I chair right now. 90% of our annual support comes from the annual fund. If the annual fund falls short, programs and initiatives have to be sharply cut back. Thirdly, capital campaigns. The special times when we come together to raise money for buildings, facilities, something of that nature. A capital campaign has a hopeful thing of it starts, ends, and then you rest. The resting, however, is something that was really for the 20th century. Most organizations I'm involved with are in one sustained capital campaign after another. As one ends, the next one comes in. Fourth, you'll plan giving, the special kinds of things that one does in one's later years life in terms of estate planning. And finally, events, special galas, things of that nature. Different organizations may have very different mix of the revenue sources. My church is a wonderful example now. I mentioned that 90% of its budget comes from the stewardship. We also, unfortunately, have a decaying front facade of the church. So we are launching a new program, a new meeting, which I was at last night, a capital campaign, to raise some $4 or $5 million to take care of that. And still, a third piece is we have some parishioners who are rather mature in their years, and we are helping them to think about special ways that they can basically plan their retirement plans, wills and estate plans to be beneficial. All of that is going on there. A teaching hospital, whose capital campaign I am also heading, has a very different thing. That basically philanthropy is primarily focused on bricks and mortar. The annual fund is a much smaller part of their operation, but intense efforts to secure the gifts that allow new wings and things of that nature. Very important, the interest in these revenue sources tends to differ over the stage of a donor's life cycle. And I'll talk about the donor's life cycle for several times here, that it normally starts by one getting engaged in the organization and participating, in the annual fund. At a later stage of life, that one, as well as financial resources grow, you begin to get involved more and more in capital campaigns. And then as you come on into your late 60s, 70s, and 80s, the planned giving becomes a very important thing. The important thing, and we'll come back and talk about this several times, is I look for the engagement of somebody over a very long period of time. Their period of time as a trustee may in fact be almost a shorter amount of time that they will be involved with an organization. And I'll talk more about that in just a couple of minutes. Next slide. The most important committee on the board in terms of development activity is the governance committee. And it is the governance / nominating committee which is charged with helping to define and locate and attract to the board the kinds of people who will not only participate in governance, but will enable it to fulfill its development role. And that means that we look for people who have capacity to be significantly involved in helping the organization forward, and people who are what I call connectors, people who have very wide contacts, able to put together meetings with people, mobilize support, and so forth. And I particularly value the connectors. I look for people to join the board where very quickly they can see this as becoming their number one or two personal priority. That as they buy into the mission, they get deeper and deeper. Because of the development that the nonprofit boards are often much larger than the for-profit boards, that a nonprofit board of 20, 30 is not unusual. You go to the far extreme of the Dana-Farber in Boston, our most successful fundraising operation, and it's, I believe, 126 people, and they and their friends raise about 3/4 of the most successful cancer charity money raised in Boston. Term limits, absolutely crucial. I need to continually be attracting new people on. And what I'm hoping to do is that as people finish up their term, that I can keep them on an advisory committee or a special committee looking at some particular part of the operation and keep the thing going. For example, I spent 8 years on the board of a arts organization called Historic New England, that as my term ran off, why I was asked to join their board of advisors and be vice chair of the board of advisors. And what that basically did, it sort of kind of kept the giving and the support that had been going on as a trustee, continuing to stay on with the organization. And now we're talking about, the planned giving kind of activities. So I look for a lifelong engagement with a trustee. In this way, it is absolutely different from the for-profit world. I served on perhaps a dozen for-profit boards during my time at the school. They were rich, they were exciting, wonderful development. And when my term was over, for the most part, we went in different ways. For the nonprofits, almost everyone that I have been involved with 20, 30 years ago, I have some kind of a relationship going forward to this point in time. And that is really the critical kind of thing, is the ability to build a relationship so that the period of time as a trustee becomes a part of your time and you then go forward. That places that I can take former trustees, and I particularly anxious to keep involved, vice chair, head of the board of advisors, trustee emeritus, emerita, special advisory committees. There are multiple kinds of ways that as you go on, that you begin to think of how you can keep people involved, because it's that network of donor support, which is so absolutely critical. Next slide. That lifelong connectedness. Once you're there, I hope 10, 20 years down the road, you will be involved. And I've just finished a situation recently where somebody served on a board with me from 1995 to 98. They then were on a board of advisors, which just kept rolling over, and had 1 or 2 meetings a year, and their annual fund gift was $2,500, something like that. And out of nowhere, suddenly a $2 million gift arrived. That they'd been paying attention, they'd been thinking about what the organization was doing, they liked it, their life circumstances had changed. So ongoing contact is absolutely critical. The donor life cycle, much longer than the trustee life cycle. That people get very excited about term limits, and I want them and I move forward. But at the same time, my most important advice is don't do stupid things. And if there are some people that are particularly generous of a particular way, you need to know how to, in fact, keep those people, involved. The development, that is a role 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That I can recall when I was heading the campaign for the Diocese of Eastern Massachusetts. That was a cold January day, coming up the Boston Common Garage to walk up 300 yards across the Austin headquarters. I ran into one of my colleagues, a colleague who joined the school from being CEO of another company, and I'd had him as a student years earlier. So, Ray, what are you doing here? He said, well, I'm off to meet Governor Senator Brown to talk about helping him raise money for his campaign. That's what I was doing. And I said, well, I was off to meet with the Episcopal Bishop of Massachusetts. And he said, that's interesting. I said, I'm an Episcopalian. And I just stopped. The temperature moved up to about 70 degrees outside. The snow seemed sort of like a little rain. And I said, yeah, tell me more. He said, oh, yes, I was senior warden of my church, down in New Jersey. And I said, well, of course, you aren't doing that church anymore because you're at Harvard. He said, no, I'm now out at this church out in Wellesley. And at that moment, with that information, why we on our own ways. Arrived in the bishop's office, and I said, this is what development is all about. 2 weeks later, my colleague was in to have lunch with the bishop to just talk about general issues. And the bishop expressed a desire to be able to see him teach a class. He'd never want to see any of my classes. After the class, which he talked about with great enthusiasm, he then asked whether my colleague would be willing to do just a small pro bono consulting job for the diocese. And my colleague was just enormously pleased. He said, Warren, they really listened to me. 14 people came and listened to my findings. And the whole thing went so nicely that he hardly felt the 6-digit gift, which moved on into the diocese. You just never know that you are looking wherever you're around for opportunities, and they come right out of nowhere. So it's not just the routine, it's being creative about it. Next slide. For the trustee, mission must be a personal priority. That I need to recruit trustees who can come to really buy in. The next thing for the reluctant donor, asker, is to give your own gift until it hurts. Nothing stiffens my spine more than when I've given a large check to an organization and where I have the passion for it, and I am starting to communicate that passion to other people. And when I'm coming out and asking you for your support, basically, I'm not coming to you as a beggar. That's what a lot of people think about it. I'm providing an opportunity for you to do something important, which you don't have the necessary time in your life to do, but which you believe in. And I think that is the critical thing, is that the trustee needs to believe in the mission, and in believing in the mission, wants to give the opportunity for other people to participating in solving this problem. And if you keep that forward, it makes all the difference, in the world. We go to the next slide. To help yourself forward is a 5-minute elevator pitch. Good. You need to sort of think out in 2, 3, 4 minutes. What is the mission? Why are you supporting it? Why should they do it? And the more you practice it, the better you get. That research can help. I always try and understand something about the person I'm with. If I don't know them, personally, what are likely to be the hot buttons? And finally, very important, rejection is not seen as, must not be seen as something personal. That it is different people have different priorities. And even the real heavyweights, have anxiety going forward to this. Hank Paulson, great graduate of the school, former chairman of Goldman Sachs and secretary of the Treasury. I worked with him during his role when he was chairman of the board of advisors at Tsinghua University, and he had to basically ask every one of the other board members for financial support. And to see this austere businessman who does multi-billion-dollar deals, sweat bullets about asking people, to give money was absolutely fascinating. And of course, he was partly said, if they participate, what I'm interested in, I'll have to participate in theirs. So that was interesting. Steve Schwarzman, the founder of Blackstone, basically building Schwarzman College at Tsinghua University with his initial $100 million gift. He then personally solicited, $500 million additional funds from all around the world, from friends, associates, and so forth. And his batting average was a great deal less than 100%. That people do it. They do it because they believe in it and because it makes a big difference. And it doesn't mean you're going to be successful. I am a Bostonian and brought up in a generation where the greatest baseball player of all time played in Boston, Ted Williams. Ted Williams batted .406, the all-time batting average record in the American League, which meant that more than half the time he struck out. But the law of averages, you work out and you go forward. You must go out, ask. It's a lot like fly fishing. It's a highly personalized, kind of activity. Finally, on my last slide here, that summarizing, as a solicitor, you are providing an opportunity. You are providing an opportunity for other people to help in a cause that you really believe in. Anxiety in advance is normal, but keeping the fact that you're really out moving the world forward makes a huge difference in your psychology. I have 4 favorite trustees, each one of which taught me a different lesson. The first one was the first organization whose board I chaired. It was a small school of a couple of hundred students. That the first capital campaign I ever ran, that I began by soliciting all the board members. There was one board member I just couldn't bear. She was a 63-year-old. She had graduated from the school. Her 2 children graduated the school, and her granddaughter was in 2nd grade. And the school, for whatever reason, decided that her 4-year-old grandson was not of the stuff that school was really all about. And it was before I became chairman, and I was embarrassed. 6 months later, she called me up. She said, "Warren, you like this capital campaign here about? Nobody's ever come to ask me." Absolutely delighted. Came down the next night, rolled out the blueprints. She listened to me politely for half an hour. I never remember looking me dead in the eyes and saying, "Warren, this is a good building. It will outlive the current head," who she despised because her grandson turned down. Right on the spot, gave me a $10,000 check while giving a new wing to the school her grandson went to. You just never know when you go out what complexity of emotions are in behind. One of my favorite is a woman with 1,000 contacts. 3 times we've had to run big opening events in cities like as diverse as Newport, Rhode Island, Providence, and Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Each time, so Warren, here's who I know, bing, 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 bing. 2 small dinner parties, you're off and running. The ability to set out, mobilize people, it's a rare gift. And if I can get somebody like that involved, or several people like that on my board, it tremendously leverages me. Their giving isn't nearly as important as the opportunity to introduce to people. Then I call the fearless asker. And this was somebody who just didn't know how not to ask. She'd sit down, she'd look at you right between the eye and say, "Warren, I know that you love this organization, and here's what I'm going to ask you to do." And she always asked, did it with enthusiasm, and of course made a huge difference. And finally, the trustee that I particularly remember was a father whose son had been admitted to this school, having been turned down by a couple of other schools, and that had had a great success. And I remember going into the father's office and saying, I'd like to ask you to join the board. And that he looked at me, he said, Warren, I can't do that. I'm a conflict of interest with the school I went to. He said, but what you've done for my son's support, I can't say no. And he burst into tears. And not surprisingly with that, a huge field house and other things, came out of it. But these are all human stories. You're out dealing with it, and the mindset is really important. And that's really what I wrote this book about, was to try and encourage people to go out, join the board, and take this very difficult work, because at the end of it, it's extremely psychologically rewarding that you go back and see you have really leveraged yourself over a much larger audience. And with that, let me stop now, and or else we can move in whatever direction you'd like.
Warren, thank you very much for this insightful introduction to one of the number of impactful chapters of the book of effective fundraising. We have an audience here. We have in our group people who are executives of very impactful nonprofits. We have board members, we have trustees, we have people generally interested in social enterprise, people who might be considering roles, professional roles in social enterprise, those who are considering being board members, who are considering being trustees, perhaps some that haven't been so far. Curious, before we get into some questions specifically about the subject matter of your introduction, how you got to social enterprise, how you got to the nonprofit world after technology, after the leadership in Asia, and how you developed the interest and passion for being involved, leading, and teaching in the space.
It's really quite embarrassing that I was deeply involved in computer technology, traveling all around the world, having a terrific time. And in fact, my wife observed that my favorite part of Boston seemed to be Logan Airport as opposed to home. And that out of nowheres, a letter went out from the head of the board of the small school of a couple of hundred students that my 6-year-old daughter was going to, a call for trustee nominees. I never saw that letter. My wife, I saw it, and as near as I can reconstruct it, if I could get Warren involved in this would be 10 more nights a year that he would be at home going to board meetings as opposed to traveling to airports around the world. And so she called up the head of the board and asked whether a Harvard Business School professor might be barely marginally qualified to serve on the board of this august kindergarten to sixth grade, and even suggested that if in fact that happened, my eleemosynary juices might run somewhat faster. 3 weeks later, I got a phone call. I knew nothing about it. I was thrilled that my community understood the breadth of my interest, and I got involved. And within 2 years, I was chairman of the board, and that sort of and it was just really an interesting way to impact children's life in one way. And that led me to a second school board. And then as that undone, why I reached out to the hospital in the community and was able to find somebody there. And so it just started sort of building from it. And what I was interested in is that, first it was very psychologically rewarding. I love my corporate boards. We did wondering, interesting things with products, things of that nature. But the nonprofit board, I won't say it's almost a spiritual experience. You're sort of contributing to sort of moving people's lives forward in positive ways, and that's that's why it just kept right on going. And that's I spent 5 years is charge of external relations at the school, which is a really large group. And that gave me a feel for how to then see how a really large scale one operated. And that then made me able to work a whole series of medium-sized nonprofits.
It's very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. And it sounds like from small beginnings in terms of the level of involvement that it gradually grew, expanded and expanded. And curious, how would you suggest people who are open to it are considering becoming trustees of boards of non-for-profits, boards of various social enterprise organizations? How do you think they should consider? They have a curiosity, they're not sure how to apply themselves, to what degree to get involved, what kinds of non-for-profits. What would you think are some of the first steps for people to get into that world?
I think the first thing is to really ask what is your passion. That for example, that when I was chairman of the Mount Auburn Hospital Board, almost half of my trustees were what I call grateful patients, either grateful patients or spouses of grateful patients. The hospital was there at a particular point in their life. It basically saved their lives, enormous life extension. And with that, there came an affection. And we were able to sort of, as we sort of reached around, we were able to bring a group of people like that in who had the skill set to sort of make it work. So I think the question is sort of, what is your passion? One of my friends' son tragically died of cystic fibrosis. And he basically made his whole life the building of that, the research, the funding, and so forth. And with that, then not only did them, but then moved on to a whole other series of major nonprofits. But that was the thing that really kickstarted him in that area.
Thank you, Warren. And then if somebody has chosen a particular area, are starting to be involved, one of the questions we just got is, what are some of the best ways, best tools to support a trustee in making asks if they're new to fundraising?
The first thing is that there are a series of books, of which mine is one. There are also some audio programs to get yourself up and running, and then you need to start. And what I start is I for my my church, why I basically take the people that are new in the stewardship committee, and I give them, here are 4 or 5 people I'd like you to see who I know are deeply committed, they'll have given, and those will be positive calls. And so as you then go through that, then you begin to start doing more complicated ones. But there's a notion of the easy asks them first, and then as you get along the way, you get further. One of the other things, of course, is that sometimes it's very effective to do solicitation as a team of 2. And there are 2 reasons for that. And I did one of those this week. And so it's clear. The first one is that 2-on-1, the conversation moves back and forth and you can do it. The second thing is that people may tell you beforehand, here is how much money you think you should ask your Boris for. Boris, but you're in there by yourself and the customer is going, and Boris looks more and more formidable along the way. And the $100,000 Boris asked then is pushed down to $5,000. Boris is delighted to get away with $5,000, says yes. You walk back and then says, well, how did the solicitation go? So it was a tough one, but Boris agreed to ask for $5,000. I said, Warren, did you ask him for the $100,000? And most of the time, people lie and say, yes, I did, and they didn't ask for it. So a dynamic of 2 people in the solicitation, but collusion of that drops to about 0. So there's, it's all part of getting the thing going.
There's synergies all around in the discussion with the prospect and the discussion together and how people interact back with the organization. That's very interesting. What about if people are saying, you know what, I really, really want to be involved. I really want to be a trustee. I really want to be on the board. I want to add value in other ways. I can't help with fundraising. What do you say?
I've got jobs for them also, and that they may be jobs in different parts of the organization. That if I always need at least one or two really good financial people. I need somebody to head an audit committee, and I need to have somebody chairing the finance committee. And I think that's important that we're focusing here on the development piece. The building of a board is a much broader, kind of thing. And so that, or to build a board is you need to have in your mind a portfolio of what the backgrounds and skills were. And sometimes you can be just dumb lucky that I was heading this school's governance committee, 4 years ago. And I was off at a hospital board meeting and actually a hospital fundraising committee meeting. And so I just, because I was going to the school afterwards, I had the school tie on. And so that person next to me, about halfway through me, she said, "So is that a Dexter tie?" I said, "Yes." She said, "My daughter goes there." And he then talked about what a good experience she was having. And I had been looking for a qualified doctor to join the board because you needed somebody there to give advice. And to make a long story short, why 2 months later, he was on the board. 4 months later, COVID came, and he was the single most valuable board member. I mean, that the headmaster was basically taking his instruction. I mean, just extraordinary. But I knew in my mind I needed a doctor. I was having trouble finding a doctor, and you just never know. It's a little bit like the raising money for my colleague in the underground area. You're just always on the search, and you have a portfolio in your mind, and you then hope you can fill it.
Warren, it sounds like similarly to having a pipeline and a funnel for the actual funds, there's a funnel and a pipeline for trustees and board members, right?
Absolutely. And then the question is to sort of to look for traditional sources and to look for untraditional ones. I mean, this is a there's an art as to how you do it for a particular organization at a particular time, and that periodically some organizations kind of slow down, and that you have to then really try and sort of accelerate the process.
Should we assume these skills and the knowledge are very easily transferable from a nonprofit to a nonprofit enterprise, social enterprise to social enterprise? Or should we assume some form of industry ramp up in addition to just the organizational kind of ramp up for a trustee, for a board member?
It varies. So that, for example, that the hardest one that I was on was the hospital. And that you go into a hospital board meeting and the room is absolutely filled with nouns that you haven't got a clue what they're talking about if you're coming in as a layperson. And that I used to do when I love to have Harvard MBAs as a board member, and then Harvard MBA in that environment feels quite threatened, and there's only one person in the room that he relates to, and that is the chief financial officer. And the chief financial officer is always looking for another board member to have his ideas bounce off of, because he normally thinks the CEO is irresponsible. And so the CFO basically, like a homing, the two sort of unholy mating signals come from 300 yards apart. They get together, and in no time at all, they can make a big problem. I make sure that for my new MBA, the first step is not on to the finance committee. It's off to the medical affairs committee, where cases of malpractice are heard, so that you get a good dose of understanding what the mission of the hospital is, what healthcare is about. And when you have that, when that's deeply embedded in you, it's that kind of organization. then I can use you in all sorts of other ways. But the notion of embedding and understanding the mission is just, absolutely, crucial. So that for some boards like that's particularly important. Another thing, of course, is a museum. Is that there as you put together the board, that there are people called collectors, and they can provide useful insight, and they also have gifts of art and so forth that that over time might come on. So the process of how to build the orbit and get people into your orbit, again, turns out to be very important.
That's very interesting, and thank you for those specific interesting examples. Going back to the example of the hospital, Calabuino has a question. He's thanking Warren Yu for the presentation and wants to share that he serves on the board of a philanthropic hospital for children with disability in Kampala, and a key challenge is people. How does one balance fundraising for the beneficiaries with fundraising for capability building, especially staff training? So I think the question, plus how does one focus the needs, the uses of the fundraising relative to how the fundraising is done?
That's, of course, the art, because what the donor is most excited about isn't necessarily what the organization needs, and you just strain horribly. And I've been just working with this one in the last week. Is our hospital is just finishing up a significant capital campaign. The center of it was a total redoing of the emergency room, which is the front door. Half our patients come through it. It's really critical. It's very high in my mind. Then there was another thing called a healing garden, where after when a patient is staying there recovering, they can walk around with their friends and so forth. People love to give money for the healing garden, and giving money, for the operating room, for the emergency room, which is really critical, was just a lot harder. And so, basically in no time at all, I had twice as many pledges, for the healing garden as we needed, with people wanting still more. And I was sucking gas on terms of what we really needed. And it just required highly focused discussions, explaining what the need was, and hoping that you could get some people to be able to go back and redirect their pledge. But it's always a problem, because the thing that catches your attention, the human, may not be where the real need is, and that's where you get to dissimulate, and you basically do 100 other things, to sort of help get people from point A, over to point B.
Interesting. And speaking of difference in interests, trade-offs, potential obstacles, Craig Ellis is asking, do you see a situation in which trustees expect a degree of influence or control over strategic decisions based on their giving beyond what is desired by executive leadership of the organization? How do you manage that both proactively and reactively?
That's so a bit like this. Does the sun rise in the east? And the boy, yes, it does. And it just just have to be absolutely ironclad clear that the philanthropic support allows your idea to be heard, but it doesn't mean it's going to be agreed on. And that's a particularly difficult time right now in universities as a result of the problems that are going on in the Hamas and Israel and so forth. Why donors on both sides are just saying whatever the institution is doing, it should be less of that and more of the other. And another group of donors are saying the other way, and that the challenge is to try and basically honor what the donor tries to give, but when it pushes you far enough, you don't have much of a choice but to actually give the money back. That's hard, and that but it's again your reality.
Understood. Warren, Corinne McDonald, and this is regarding what we're talking about, the organization versus donors, the level of influence, the level of power. Corinne McDonald says, AMP 160, 2001, you and your anecdotes were the highlight of our day. Thank you. And Corinne has a question. With a board that has traditionally restricted decision-making to the executive committee, how do you bring an understanding of the opportunities for board engagement and the lifelong linkages you're speaking about?
Okay, there's several questions sort of embedded in that. The first one is the role of the executive committee. And this is one of the things that is very, very delicate. That I remember joining an organization and there was a 30-person board, and they had a 6-person executive committee. That the 30-person board met about 45 minutes a month, from 5:30 to 6:15, 6:30. All the key strategic decisions were made at the executive committee level. In fact, the executive committee meetings were so rich and full-flowing that half the executive committee members, didn't in fact come, to the full board. And so after about a year and a half, I was thinking, life is too short. Maybe I can get a gift from memory of my father and get into something, else. And then a series of problems came up, which put me into the center. My point behind this one is that executive committees are formed because of the need for people to make decisions, quickly, assemble people in a hurry, but that they are not meant to disempower the rest of the board. And you need to make extremely careful that things like the head evaluation, things of that nature, are done in executive session by the board, as a whole. That executive committees, the efficiency alienates people on the outside. That I remember that because what you wind up is you have an upstairs, downstairs board, and all the excitement goes on in the executive committee. So one of the ones I'm on right now is every time the executive committee meets, the next board meeting, there has to be a basic dump of what the key issues were. And we use executive committee basically to get business done between board meetings, but the full board needs to understand what's up and running.
Understood. Thank you. In terms of sensitivities, at times of trouble, organizations that might have been damaged through their action, through the environment, etc. One of the questions is, what are the recommendations for fundraising for nonprofits who have perceived brand negativity? And do you have any examples of organizations who successfully overcame brand negativity?
That's a great question. That you've run. I've had cases of organizations where the mission has basically disappeared, and that you've been running. You have a fundraising machine that goes on, running. And an example of that way was, of course, that the old the song, the war on the vaccines for polio, and that the March of Dimes was the most potent fundraising organization in the United States, 70,000 strong, raising money for this thing. And suddenly the 2 vaccines were developed and polio as a scourge disappeared. Now, what do you do with a 70,000 person organization skilled in raising money? And suddenly the purpose of it is gone. And they just struggle through a terrible period of time. Because you might say, why didn't they shut down? But that wasn't quite in the way the organizations work. And there was a long period of time while they searched to come up with another cause that they were able to mobilize it around. But so that's not quite the example of disrepute, but it's one where the mission just disappeared, and quite a good case could have made that the organization should have been closed down. The question is, when you have something with an unsavory mission, is enough of its core business keeping going? I mean, if there was fraud and so forth inside, that's something that can be handled, because you can basically say the problem, is behind you. That if you have cases of a couple of schools which had very difficult sexual harassment and things inside it, that the question was, did you want to join a board like that, or in fact the reputation in the community was that this was a place where there were problems, and the question that was have the problems and addressed, and you help it, and in one of those cases, that people did join it, and it did come on out. But the notion the same way that when you get on the wrong side of publicity, it can tip the whole wagon.
Warren, thank you. And you've talked about organizations dealing with structural changes, with changes in their environment, changes in the market effectively. And a lot of change around us right now, technological. And Shafiq Khan is asking Warren, how important is crowdfunding in today's world? Could you speak to it and the means, mechanisms that you've seen, you believe are effective in using technology these days, technology in the process of fundraising, using technology in supporting social enterprises?
Yeah, those are, to be honest, but the organizations I've been involved with have not been doing that. That crowdfunding is much more effective, dealing with a different demographic of the end users, donors, and so forth. So I'm aware of it, and that I haven't had firsthand experience with it.
That's fair. That makes sense. Warren, we have another comment from John Didrikson. John says,
Yes.
Warren, I love to see you as passionate as I remember you were as early as 1968.
Both of us had a lot more hair at that time and of a different color.
Yet passionate then and passionate now, which is fantastic. Warren, thank you for this insightful, far-reaching, thoughtful and detailed discussion. Wondering what you think people need to think about as they get off this call, if they are a nonprofit social enterprise executive, if they're existing donor, potential donor, or they're about to become one, what should be their first immediate action steps, you think? One or several, you think they should think about doing to be more effective as fundraisers, as being involved in the social enterprise community when they get off this call?
I think the basic point is to be able to reach out to your development committee, and instead of avoiding the calls, get involved. That you can really make a difference. That the fact that you're involved, the very fact that you're making the ask, says a lot about your belief in the organization, and it just kind of swallow the anxiety, get in there and ask. If I'm running the nonprofit, the question is, who are there on my board that might have those skills that I could enlist and start getting involved? Can I get them involved with me on a couple of joint calls instead of just doing it by myself plus a trustee? It's a way of getting the thing up and running. And for the donor, it's a question of who else do I know that I can get involved. One of the things that I try behind me is to leave somebody behind me with the skill sets that I have, or complementary ones, so that the board is an ongoing living enterprise, and you need to be continually looking, for the next generation of people coming in. Otherwise, you all grow gracefully old together. Which the most exciting board I was on was one which was a turnaround when the 84-year-old CEO felt he finally had to step down. And the 30-year in the position board chair thought his board was a little bit ancient. And that was just, it was extraordinary. You have to kind of take something like that apart, decompose it, and get the pieces together.
It's awesome. Warren, thank you very much for that advice, guidance, inspiration, insights. We're grateful for this dialogue discussion. Thank you very much on behalf of our club, on behalf of the attendees and us. Thank you for this discussion.
And just keep that cold weather north of the border.
Yes, we'll
do our very best.
100%.
Wonderful talking. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to hand it off to Danielle Bushen, who leads our social enterprise initiatives as VP Social Enterprise. He is a longtime HBS Club of Toronto officer and is the global head of people analytics data governance at Sanofi. In addition to her previous involvements as leading HR data and analytics for Royal Bank, being previously a partner and global portfolio leader at Mercer, focused on workforce metrics, who's a Bachelor of Arts in International Relations from the University of Toronto, has a master's from the University of Waterloo, and is a graduate of the HBS GMP program. Danielle, over to you. Looking forward
Thank you so much, Boris.
to the panel.
And, I have to say, I am a graduate of the GMP program in 2016, which was Warren's final year teaching in that program. And we had the good fortune of having him as one of our instructors as part of GMP, and celebrated his retirement at that time. And clearly retirement has not caused him to stop teaching, to stop being involved in the community. It's so great to have you back with us now. And I've reflected just a little bit on my own journey as a volunteer in social enterprise as I listened to Professor McFarlan's commentary. And it is so true that your path follows your life journey. I started out volunteering as a board director in a daycare. My children were in daycare at the time. And I moved from there to being involved in youth sports in the community. I am currently on the admissions committee for my alma mater. And my children are in post-secondary education at this stage. And I also get involved in mentoring women in underprivileged communities to become entrepreneurs. And I have the good fortune today of being the VP Social Enterprise for the HBS Club of Toronto, which is another educational opportunity for me to help bring people to the school, to Harvard Business School. And today we are going to finish today's session just talking a little bit about how we can actually give back to the Toronto community and to the not-for-profit space. I have a couple of former participants in the HBS not-for-profit program who are joining us, Colleen, Frank, Shane, all on the line. Hopefully you are able to join us with video and sound as well here in just a moment. Boris, if I can ask you just to put up your the slide for a second. There are two important programs that we support through HBS Toronto to involve not-for-profit community leaders in ongoing education. The first is Strategic Perspectives in Nonprofit Management, affectionately known as SPINM. Probably the worst acronym in the world, but both Colleen and Agapi, who I don't think has been able to join us today, are graduates of the SPINM program. Next year's offer will be in late July and early August on campus in Boston. Beautiful time of year to be on the coast. And they have both participated in that program and can share some of their experiences with that exercise. The other program we support is called Driving Nonprofit Performance and Innovation, which, as many of you know, finding performance management tools and engaging in the business of innovation and performance management in nonprofits can be a challenge in an environment that is motivated by a different mission-driven kind of approach than the traditional for-profit business world. Frank Sirotek and Shane Green, both from the mental health community, were participants in that program this past year. That program is a full-time virtual session and runs in March in 2024. So what I would like to do to start us out with our little panel discussion is to ask each of you to share just a little bit about your role the organization that you're involved with, and maybe a comment or two on the program that you took and your experience of their engagement with HBS. And Frank, I'm going to start with you because you're in the middle of my screen.
Okay. Thanks, Danielle. And it's a pleasure to be with you all this afternoon. Once again, my name is Frank Sorotic, the Chief Research Officer at the Canadian Mental Health Association in Toronto. We're an organization's federation across the country, and I work at the Toronto branch. A lot of my role, it's evaluating programs, it's supporting quality improvement initiatives within the organization, but we also have a role in our sector. We are trying to work with our colleagues and other organizations really to move our sector forward to better demonstrate the impact of our services, because historically that's been a challenge for our sector. And given that goal and my current role, really the program that I participated in, a nonprofit performance and innovation program, was really invaluable on multiple levels. It really helped just offering conceptual models, different ways of approaching. I guess historically how I approached things was very much through a research lens. The frameworks that were provided more of a strategic vantage point for how we can think about positioning the organization, but also how we can demonstrate what our impact is. So it was really helpful. The course content, the instructors were amazing. I can't rave enough about the instructors, and really the colleagues, my peers. The value of being able to see individuals from really across the world in various different sectors. So it was a transformative experience for myself.
Amazing. Colleen, how about you?
Thank you so much, Daniel. And Frank, you just took some of my superlatives, but I am the executive director of the Canadian Club Toronto, which is 125 years old, dedicated to engaging Canadians in what matters most. And at this time, really dedicated to long format conversations that support democracy and all of the issues that Canadians are grappling with right now. We've had everyone speak, from Winston Churchill, Amelia Earhart, every prime minister, lots of really great conversations that take place at the podium. I was so lucky to be able to go to the live in-person Spin-Em program on so many levels. We're a very small organization. There's only 3, sometimes 4 of us that work there. And so I wear very many hats and sometimes get overwhelmed. And to be able to be on that campus with all those people who also share some of those challenges, whether it's fundraising or operations or AI or all of the things, was really made me feel better about what I am able to do, and then lifted me up in also other ways of challenging me and thinking about it. But like Frank, number one was meeting 150 people from 24 different countries, tackling, from arts to cancer research to, I learned about so many people's passions, and it was amazing to be around. So it was transformative, as Frank said.
Shane, I see you nodding.
I am nodding in abundant agreement with what my colleagues here are saying. So I'm Shane Green. I'm the VP Programs at jack.org. We are a Toronto-based national charity that works alongside young people from coast to coast to coast in the mental health promotion space. So we work with young people in programs, peer-to-peer delivery of educational programs that work to destigmatize mental health struggles, help young people recognize those signs of struggle in themselves and in their peers, and then have the agency and the knowledge to do something about that if and when they are struggling, including going into needing the resources that Frank and colleagues provide if in fact they need that sort of thing. I would echo much of I wouldn't dispute anything I've heard, but I'd echo a few things in particular. I think, you know, what Frank was saying about this program, I was in the DNPIV program, and the fact that it was helping us to navigate some of those many challenges that we face, not unique to the mental health sector, but it's certainly true of our sector, in measuring an impact in a really meaningful way. That came for me and for Jack.org at a perfect time. I was leading the work to develop our new 3-year strategy, which we've just started living into in July. So this program, the frameworks and the network of expertise that I could draw on in the midst of that work really couldn't have come at a better time. The final thing I might say before just handing it off is the network, the groups have come up a number of times, and one of the things that really stood out for me was, like, I've taken these sorts of programs before, but never one where there's such a high level of rigor in the case studies presented, but also just really unique to the not-for-profit space. And I just found it so amazing to see and be reminded once again that, yes, there are wonderful, giving and passionate people that make up the not-for-profit space, but there's also so much talent and expertise and real knowledge and insight. It was a pleasure to be able to draw down on that for the week.
Amazing. And I'm thrilled to say that Agapi has been able to migrate from the attendees group into the panelist group. So she's able to share a few thoughts as well. Thank you. Welcome, Agapi.
Yeah, so sorry. I was like, I'm here, but I didn't know what to say. Hello, everyone. So good to be here. Could you just reiterate the question really quickly?
Yeah, just where you work, what's your role, and the program you're a part of.
So I have the honor and the privilege of being the executive director at C Center for Young Black Professionals in Toronto, and we focus on workforce development. I've been doing this work for a number of years, and this experience has been, I graduated from the SPINUM, I know we need to find a better acronym, but from the SPINUM program a little bit just this past summer. And I think anyone who is thinking about doing it, it really has helped me. This is my second organization leading as an executive director, but I think that this has really helped me to elevate my understanding in a room full of other folks who are doing similar work with organizations that are smaller, larger, different contexts, different industry, and kind of bringing everyone together. If those of you who do have the opportunity to do it in person, it's a very well curated experience. And so that's what I'm doing now. I don't want to say too much because I'm sure there's more questions to come, but that's me.
Well, each of you has made a few comments around, key takeaways, memorable experiences, sort of your sentiment around the organization. I would ask you to just comment on who should attend. HBS Club of Toronto is soliciting applications now. The deadline is December 1st for 2024, in case I didn't mention that yet. And it is open to all not-for-profits across the city of Toronto and the GTA. So when you think about the roles that you run into in your world and the types of folks that you interacted with in the program, who should be applying? Colleen, I see you're ready to jump in.
Yeah, I think that anyone who's leading a not-for-profit at a high level, executive directors, senior fundraisers, would definitely get a lot out of the in-person SPINUM program. I also found it as a mother with a number of children that I hadn't been able to be away for a while, and that, pushing yourself, like I started drinking Diet Coke again because I was up so early and up so late, and it was of course free at the cafeteria. So, but it was like this energy that I re-tapped into. So I would encourage anyone at younger or even older, when you think you know it all, you don't, and it's just lovely to be away, thinking with and speaking with all those kind of people and learning from the incredible professors. So I think you need to be confident in the role. Like, you're talking to so many people, like the woman who founded Sandy Hook Promise sat beside me, and these people are doing unbelievable things, and you are too, but just go in there with the confidence that you're going to learn so much.
Anyone want to add to that? Shane?
Yeah, maybe just one thing. You know, Frank and I were in the virtual program, and admittedly, I was not apprehensive, but just a bit nervous about what is an intense week of all day virtual sessions going to be like. And it was fantastic. It was very intense, but worth it. I think it's fair to say that there is something missing from, you know, sitting next to someone and sharing a Diet Coke that you're not getting online. But the way that the program is built is they really do make an effort to foster those linkages at the start of every day and throughout the day. So you are feeling human connection, not just hours of absorption. There's a real engagement even within the virtual program.
Frank?
HBS is very good at what they do in bringing people together. I was impressed as an event runner, just flawless, and I'm sure online was just like that.
I would definitely add to that and say that it's a very well curated experience. And so I would say anyone who wants to do this should be ready and very clear about what they want to get out of it. I think if you go in there with real intention, they ask you, you know, to come with a critical issue that you need solving. Really think about what that looks like, because you will get a wealth of knowledge. And if you really want to solve your issue, I think going into it, maybe in an organization that maybe you're just like trying to figure out where you're at, maybe wouldn't be the best. I think if you kind of know what you want and where you want to go, and you just need some help on how to get there, and you're clear on that, going there with very clear asks. I don't think it's a place to kind of unravel and figure out so much, from my opinion. I think if you are very clear about what your asks are, clear about your questions, then you'll probably get a lot out of it. And understanding where the pain points are in your organization and being very clear to be able to articulate that and understand what problems that you're trying to solve. I think that that's one of the things that I would strongly suggest, is that you have a leader who's really ready to put action to solution.
And Gapi, I know you also got advice ahead of attending on how to prepare. Do you want to share those?
Yes.
That
Yes.
anecdote?
We are all very busy, and obviously those folks who are going to be attending something like this, you're going to be an executive director, you're going to be in senior leadership roles. We're all very busy, but the advice that I got from somebody who did this was, make sure you're doing your readings. Like, going in there intentionally is so important. Making sure that you're doing the readings, there's a lot of them. And so it's not something that you want to start to do like a week before you're going. You want to make sure that you're laying it out, like take it back to university days and really start to think it through. Think about the questions that you want to ask and be methodical. You know, it's been mentioned already by Colleen, but really the folks who, it's very well curated. So you're going to have people who are in your case studies that are actually in the room. And so you'll be able to ask them questions. You'll be able to really get the most out of it. And the way that you need to do that is particularly in your groups, whether you're online or whether you're in person, you have living groups that you have discussion time with. And to get the most out of it, you really need to understand the case studies and critically think about it. And so the advice that was given to me that I'm so grateful that I had was for me to do the readings, be very prepared, read it once, read it twice, as many times as I needed to make sure that I had critical questions and did a critical analysis of it, because that's a huge part of the participation. And also, you don't have a lot of time. Like, once you're there, like, it's kind of over. Like, everything is planned for you very methodically. And so if you think that you're going to have time when you're on campus or while you're online to read these things in the evening, you're not going to. And so I would strongly, strongly recommend preparation is the key to success here.
Frank, any lasting message that you would like to give to our prospective applicants for 2024?
I think I would just build off of what was said, and the process thinking through or having what your purpose or your objectives are from the training, part of the application process will help you do that. There are a number of questions that you have to answer in the application process. And I found that actually really helpful in advance to think through, okay, what's the issue that I'm struggling with? And putting that to paper helped further conceptualize that. And then also just ensuring that you have, like, the one, I guess, regret that I didn't with myself, it was they're largely half-day courses. And then I would just go back to work. I wish I had taken the full day, to be honest. In part to just have more time to review things again. But and they'll give you this advice when you start. They refer to it as harvesting after the class. Going through within 24 hours of the course content, going through that content, and again, as you go through it with an eye to what are the implications for my organization, for myself, how can I apply that? So, and the other takeaway for me was, you know, as leaders, your scarcest resource is time. And you're not. This is a rare opportunity in terms of the courses. I would plan accordingly with your time.
Thank you so much, Shayo. I reflect on my, go ahead, Colleen.
Sorry, I just wanted to, when they were speaking about the questions and the critical questions that you're discussing with your groups, I still have my group and we touch base every couple of months, and we've updated and gone and talked about how we put those questions and our advice that we gave each other to work. So many have achieved amazing results because of our discussions, and I have another regroup in December, and it's just an incredible gift to be given, to be able to continue those conversations beyond the week.
That's exactly where I was going to comment that, you know, although I'm not part of the not-profit executive education, I did attend executive education back in 2016 with Warren as one of my instructors, and that community has stayed with me. It is, you know, the process of being on campus is exhausting and invigorating, kind of in equal measure. It challenges you to think differently about so many aspects of the strategic environment that you're focused on, but it also builds community. And, you know, when I think about our social enterprise activities here in Toronto, that's what we all continue to do. We're building community in a variety of different ways. And the community that is gifted to you by virtue of being a part of a Harvard program like this is invaluable in terms of networking, in terms of thought, and sort of creative challenge, but also in terms of having those people who you can reach out to. You know, the 1,000 connections that Warren was talking about, those are all people that become part of your long-term network of support, network of contacts, network of people that are in all different walks of life doing all different kinds of amazing things. Any lasting final comments that any of you would like to make before I sort of recap some next steps?
Just apply. I applied a couple of years in a row. I was turned down a couple of years. So just keep trying, and it's totally worth it.
Thank you for that. So for anyone who is interested in the application process, the application is available online for both programs. You should send your application to us here at the HBS Club of Toronto for sponsorship. We will screen those applications starting at the beginning of December for both programs, and make our decisions very early in the new year. So you will have lots of notice if you are a selected candidate for 2024 for either of the two programs. You do need to pick the program that you intend to apply for and apply to only one. And different ones may be a different fit for different groups. I saw in the comments in the group chat that even one of the classes from 1977 has their regular WhatsApp chat coming up this weekend. So that community never disappears. It's there with you forevermore. So I would encourage those of you who have an interest in professional development, both on behalf of your organization and for you as individuals, as leaders in the nonprofit space. It's as much as about building the leaders of the future as it is about building the capability within our nonprofit organizations here in Toronto. That's why we do this. We look forward to being able to give the gift of sponsorship to some of you in the coming year. And I do just want to thank you all for joining, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Professor and Boris.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thanks so much, Al.